This game is pretty interesting when it comes to, I guess, its overall ranking with the fandom. It's part of the original PS1 trilogy, and it stars the leading lady of the series, Jill, as well as probably the most iconic villain in the entire series. It's the classic formula that old school purists love, and it brought a good amount of upgrades to the gameplay. And yet, it's almost borderlining on being one of the black sheep of the main series. I mean, sure, it's nowhere near as considered the worst in the series, not by a long shot. But for how iconic this game is, I find it's not talked about nearly as much as the other titles, whether they be as good as the remake, or I should say remakes now, or as loathed as Resident Evil 6 is. It's honestly kind of fascinating when you consider how many things it did introduce that would become mainstays. But I suppose a mix of a style that is either you love or hate, and on top of a harder difficulty, it was kind of destined to be in the spot it was, but let's just get into it, I guess. So Resident Evil 3 takes place in Raccoon City once more around the time Resident Evil 2 does. Just it takes place before and after those events. You take control of Jill Valentine as she attempts to escape the Doomed City after feeling there's no hope in getting the officials to listen to her over the prior months. Kind of hard to convince people of the horrors when officials won't believe you, or being paid off to act oblivious. That and the mansion blowing up kinda kills any chance of you being taken seriously. Along the way to her escape, she runs into Brad Vickers, another member of STARS who warns her about a monster who's tracking down any remaining members of the unit that's still in the city. Shortly after making her way to the RPD station, Jill gets a front row seat of the hulking beast who gives Brad one of the gnarliest anime tropes ever. And that essentially sets up the plot of this game. It's Jill versus Nemesis, and oh, is this title not gonna let you forget it. Sure, there's other characters like Carlos and the UBCS, but really they kinda get overshadowed by Nemesis's presence. That's the real focus, and honestly that's probably for the best because as a concept, he's just awesome in general. But I think I'll leave the story at that. At this point, if you're watching this, chances are you've already seen or played everything this game has to offer, and are here to see if my views and takes are worthy or not. And just so you know, yeah, they are, because I fucking say so. Oh yeah, taking that fake arrogance. So, in terms of gameplay, it's pretty much what you expect out of classic Resident Evil. You roam around this interconnected map, finding key items to open up new areas, find health, ammo, or guns, all the while progressing forward into the story as you do so. Along the way, you'll solve puzzles and face off against various undead and mutated creatures that are looking to maul you for a quick snack, or want to take your head off or just for the hell of it. The standard stuff. Like I've said in the past, if you played a Resident Evil game in this style, you know what you're getting into. But one does have to give a lot of credit to this game for a lot of the mechanics that we come to expect in the series moving forward. The quick turn makes its debut here, which is easily the best addition the series has ever seen. Hell, even with all the improvements to the control over the years, this move is still the best introduced and is a lifesaver sometimes. Next, there was the ability to go up and down stairs without having to do a little quick action command. This really did throw me for a loop the first time I actually played the original Resident Evil 2, so it was nice not having to walk into the first step and actually go up normally and not look like a fucking idiot. It's a little thing, but it definitely modernized the game a bit, makes it easier to get into if you're coming from Remake or Resident Evil 0. It was also nice to see some actual puzzles this time around that actually took some effort to complete. In my opinion, Resident Evil 2's biggest weakness was the lack of real puzzles. Yeah, sure, they technically had them, but when the game literally gave you the solution, or expects you to just brute force one, it's definitely a knock against the game when the series is known for having decent puzzles to solve. So to see this game embrace it as much as it did, that was nice. In fact, these are probably some of the most challenging puzzles in the series, without it being some dick-headed solution, mind you. I'll be the first one to admit, puzzles aren't my strong suit, so if I was able to solve them, you'll definitely get through them too. But talking about challenge in a video game, this game is a lot harder in general, even more than I remember when I first played it years ago. You could probably tell just by the footage that I was playing on easy mode, mainly because I only had so much limited time and didn't want to spend any longer than needed for a mini review, but I was surprised at how many times I actually did see that "you died" screen. Granted, any time I did die was due to a cheap one-hit kill, or I was being greedy and not wanting to heal. But still, I've been playing these games for over a decade now, and these guys did sneak up on me a couple times. Oh, you will be tested this time around. Whether it's by the huge amount of zombies at once, like straight up, there's loads of these motherfuckers, and they're just looking to eat up your ammo. Which thankfully, another series staple would make its debut, the explosive oil drums. Shoot one of these with a group of enemies near it and watch as they are exploded into pieces. Easily one of the most satisfying moves you can make in this game. The Cerberuses and Spiders make a return alongside the new Drain Demos, which are very awesome enemies in design and pretty intimidating at first glance, though really I never had much of an issue with them. In fact, I usually just ignored and ran past them in most cases. Hunters make a comeback and they are as deadly as ever. Probably what killed me the most with their fucking one-hit decapitation skill. But they aren't alone, as a new amphibian version called the Gamma Hunters make their debut here. Don't sleep on these guys. I mean, granted, you probably wouldn't since they're hunters and anyone who sleeps on hunters are begging to die, but that goofier look to them doesn't mean they're easier. Oh hell no, they will mess you up big time and make that Jill sandwich line a reality. And then we make it to this guy. What can I say about Nemesis that hasn't been beaten to death? Up until Mr. X's Stalker redesign, which Nemesis obviously inspired, he's easily been the series' most iconic creature and villain that still hasn't been topped in terms of pure danger. He's fast, he's bulky, he will take a shit ton of bullets to take down if you're even brave enough to make such an attempt. He can run to close a gap on you. He's got these tentacle attacks that'll pull you in close, as well as a rocket launcher for range attacks here and there. He'll show up randomly throughout your playthrough, and he will show up a lot. Hell, he'll even follow you into other rooms if you try to run away. He's relentless and makes you have to rethink everything you came to know about the ins and outs of classic Resident Evil. Outside of speedrunning exploits that you have to be a gaming god to know and perform, you're not cheesing this guy like you could other enemies in other games. Resident Evil 3 earned that Nemesis in the title. With that being said though, sadly, as original as it may sound, Resident Evil 3 is not a perfect game by any means. To me, its biggest weaknesses are, in my opinion, its level design, and yeah, to an extent, Nemesis himself on repeated playthroughs. To the game's credit, it was really nice to be able to finally explore Raccoon City properly this time around. That was probably one of Resident Evil 2's biggest missed opportunities. The city is just about as iconic as the characters themselves, so it was really cool knowing 3 would focus more on the city this time around. Sadly, I'm not a big fan of its layout. To give it credit, they nailed just how lively and chaotic the city was this time around. You actually see NPCs roaming around at different points doing their own thing without it having to be a cutscene or a partner NPC that follows you for a bit. It was a really nice but subtle touch that I really appreciated, as it made the game feel a bit more polished. But to explore the city? Ugh. Having it be mostly narrow hallways and alleyways? I wasn't a fan. Not because of the claustrophobic feeling you would get. If anything, I kinda like not being able to easily run past enemies all the time. No, the problem was for me it felt like it took forever to get around this city. Most of these alleyways are long, like really long, and to me it killed kind of the flow. Especially that part where you have to do that long backtrack to the beginning section just to get the firehouse. Ugh. Yeah, no, fuck that part. It also doesn't help that outside of the clock tower, there's not a lot of memorable set pieces in my opinion. Though I do love that we get to visit the RPD for a bit. I don't know why I like when games do this stuff. I mean, hell, you literally only explore part of the West Wing, but revisiting locations in a sequel and approaching them in a new way, it just makes these games feel bigger as a whole, I suppose, but, I mean, back to the cons. Of course, getting decapitated is never fun, and as much as I might praise Nemesis, for veterans he definitely becomes more of an annoyance than he does threatening. Mainly his ability to follow you into different sections. Like I mentioned, it's definitely a cool and like, oh shit moment, but once the novelty starts to wear off, him chasing you into every new section does get pretty old pretty quickly. Now granted, it's only a couple of times where he'll do this, but still it was like, can you just fuck off already? Though in the end, that's more of a nitpick I find. But yeah, that was a quick little look at Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And I can see why it's kind of in this weird little bubble all to itself. It's part of the classic era that for the most part does a lot of good things to push the series forward. I mean, look at a lot of the tropes that appear in the later games. A good chunk of them has this game to thank. Yet it stumbles at points to prevent it from being the best. Just not enough for it to be harped on like Resident Evil 0 or 6 does. Now, I didn't talk about everything such as the live choices or a lack of unique bosses besides Nemesis, aka the Gravedigger, but that's mainly cause I'd be echoing what others have said, and I'm lazy today, so sue me. I enjoyed my time with Resident Evil 3, but I don't think I'll be coming back to this one as much as I do Remake or Resident Evil 2 for that matter. But hey, who knows? Maybe the remake for Resident Evil 3 will improve it enough that it may even be better than the Resident Evil 2 remake. But I'll cross that road when the time comes.